When the rain poured hardest, Tommy sat on the hospital rooftop, gripping his tiny notebook. Every night he'd scribble, "One more day, one more chance." At just 12 years old, he was fighting battles most adults couldn't fathom. What was so important that he refused to give up, even as his body seemed to fail him? Tonight, the answer would finally come to light, and it would change lives forever. Tommy wasn't supposed to be here. That's what the doctors said when he was born prematurely, fighting for every breath in an underdeveloped body. But Tommy had something they couldn't measure, an unbreakable will. His mother, Sarah, called it his spark. "You're my little firefly," she'd whisper when he struggled through yet another round of treatments, his frail body wrapped in wires and tubes. At age 10, the spark dimmed when he was diagnosed with a rare heart condition. The prognosis was grim. Treatments could only delay the inevitable. "Enjoy the time you have," the doctors advised. But for Tommy, time wasn't something you measured in hours or days. Time was something you used. Every morning, Sarah would wheel him to the hospital garden, where he'd sit for hours sketching in his notebook. The pages were filled with colorful machines, intricate diagrams, and hopeful scribbles. "This one," he'd say, pointing to a drawing of a heart-shaped pump, "will make people better." His mother would smile, hiding her tears. But the truth was, Sarah was crumbling. She worked long hours at a diner to cover the endless bills. Her once bright eyes were now rimmed with exhaustion. Yet every evening, without fail, she'd sit beside his bed and read him The Little Prince. It was Tommy's favorite. "What's essential is invisible to the eye," she'd remind him, her voice soft but steady. Tommy's determination touched everyone he met. The nurses at St. Catherine's called him their little engineer. "Tommy, you're going to build something amazing one day," Nurse Olivia said, gifting him a box of crayons. But while they encouraged him, their faces often betrayed the truth. They didn't believe he'd have the time. One evening, Tommy overheard a conversation he wasn't supposed to hear. Dr. Reynolds, the lead cardiologist, stood outside his room, speaking in hushed tones to Sarah. "We're running out of options," he said, "without a transplant." His voice trailed off. Sarah clutched her chest, her whispered reply trembling. "There has to be something." Tommy didn't cry. Instead, he opened his notebook and wrote in bold, shaky letters, "One last chance." The next morning, he insisted on visiting the children's ward. Though weak, he handed out sketches to the younger kids, spaceships, castles, and machines with hearts at their centers. On the back of each drawing, he wrote messages. "You are strong. Keep smiling. You're never alone." The nurses watched in silence, tears in their eyes. That night, Tommy's condition worsened. His heart, already fragile, struggled to keep up. Machines beeped frantically as doctors worked to stabilize him. Sarah held his hand, whispering, "Stay with me, baby. Just stay." And then, like a beacon in the dark, a call came through. A donor heart was available. It was a match. The surgery was high risk, but there was no other option. "Tommy," Sarah said, her voice trembling, "this is it. This is your chance." Through the haze of pain and exhaustion, Tommy smiled faintly. "I told you, Mom. One more day." The surgery lasted 12 agonizing hours. Sarah paced the hospital halls, her palms clasped so tightly in prayer they turned white. Nurses took turns sitting with her, though no words could calm her. When Dr. Reynolds finally emerged, his scrubs soaked and his face pale, he managed a weary smile. He made it. The weeks that followed were a blur of recovery. When Tommy finally opened his eyes, his first request wasn't for food or water. It was for his notebook. "I need to finish my heart machine," he whispered to Nurse Olivia, his voice hoarse but determined. Months passed and Tommy's strength returned, little by little. His first steps without assistance were greeted with cheers from the hospital staff. But Tommy had only one goal. He wanted to thank the donor family who had given him a second chance. Through a hospital program, Sarah and Tommy were able to meet the donor's parents, the Thompsons. Their son, Ethan, had been just 18 when a car accident took his life. Sarah and Mrs. Thompson hugged for what felt like an eternity, tears streaming down their faces. Tommy, holding his notebook, looked up at Ethan's father. "I'm going to do something with this," he said, pointing to his chest. "Something big." Years later, Tommy became an inventor. His first patented device was a compact heart pump inspired by the sketches he'd drawn as a child. The machine revolutionized pediatric heart surgeries. saving countless lives. At the launch event for his invention, he stood at the podium holding the same worn notebook that had traveled with him through every storm. "I was given a gift," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "A gift of one more day, and I promised I'd use it to give others the same chance." The audience rose to their feet, tears streaming down faces as they clapped. Among them sat Sarah, now with streaks of gray in her hair, beaming with pride. She held a small gold necklace in her hand, a heart-shaped locket engraved with the words, "One more day."